Good evening, everyone, and welcome at America House. I'm Michael Zwingenberger, the director here at America House. For the third time, we start our MSc America House Emerging Leaders program during the Munich Security Conference here at America House on a Thursday night with a specific transatlantic approach. This year, we will be covering urban solutions to hybrid threats on both sides of the Atlantic. Cities are especially vulnerable to hybrid attacks on their critical software, for example, to run energy grids, hospital infrastructure, or emergency response mechanisms. How cities can develop strong capacities for risk assessment is one of the central topics tonight. Some young mayors are on the forefront in finding ways to connect and develop shared strategies to counter hybrid threats. And I'm very happy that we can welcome two of these mayors with a global view tonight here at America House. Please welcome with me René Wilke, Mayor, Frankfurt an der Oder, Germany. Where are you? Right here. And Lacey Beatty, Mayor of Beaverton in Oregon. Welcome. And additional analysis on the topic will be provided by Martin van der Putten, Chief International and Diplomacy Officer, City of Dortmund, and Dr. Mareike Ohlberg, Senior Fellow in the Indo-Pacific Program at GMF. Welcome to you too. And I would like to also thank our partner, the German Federal Foreign Office, and Hindiya Farah, stellvertretende Referatsleiterin at the German Federal Foreign Office. And she will be speaking to us in a minute. And also Professor Dr. Daniela Schwarzer, member of the Executive Board of Bertelsmann Stiftung, because we have been partnering with those two institutions, the German Foreign Office and Bertelsmann Stiftung, for the third time this year. So thank you again for partnering with us. And again, of course, a very warm-hearted thanks to Catherine Klüver-Eschbrock. She will be moderating our event tonight, and she's here. And also, I would like to welcome all our distinguished guests in the audience. It's wonderful that you are here, and I hope you come back because we will have 13 side events altogether at America House over the next 3 days. So welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ambassador Michaelis, dear speakers, Maike, thank you so much for your hospitality. This is actually the third time that we are here, and after having heard how many events you're hosting, I can only say we are very glad we are one of them, and we are first in a row, I think. So we are very pleased that we can be here tonight, and in particular with a topic that matters a lot to our foundation. There's so much in this title, which you can see up there, and I just want to point out a few elements of this, why it matters to the Bertelsmann Stiftung that we can work on this topic and work with you in a transatlantic way and with, in particular, also young leaders. Now, the sad story is we have to worry more about hybrid threats than we have been doing so for quite a while now, because there's an increase of attacks and they hit societies often in their weakest spots. And answers to those attacks can only be found, I think, very, very close to people. So municipalities, the urban context matters a lot. It's not only public entities, but it's also companies, it is schools, it is structures of daily life that need to help cities and citizens to build resilience and to face the world which is not going to be more peaceful in the near future, unfortunately. The second point I've already highlighted is municipalities. The Bertelsmann Stiftung has a strong tradition and I think, very effective work with mayors around Germany and increasingly so in international partnerships. The transatlantic dimension is the third element, and obviously we are at the America House, and Catherine Klüver-Eschbrock, who has already been mentioned, has guided a lot of that work, and also tonight, where we try to bring together transatlantic partners, not necessarily only from the capitals, but really from various regions, from various sectors, because we do think, in particular, given the current political situation, that building and strengthening the transatlantic fabric as much as we can is a huge importance for our common future, and I firmly believe the transatlantic relationship needs to be worked on, and even more so now with the current political developments. My fourth and last point is the fact that we have young leaders in the room and on the panel, which is great because the next generation is at the heart of the work of our foundation as well. We try to work as much as we can, not only for young people, but with young people, and engage them as much as we can in our programmatic work, use them as advisors, design programming for them, with them. And so I think in that regard, this evening is really to the heart of our priorities as a foundation, and I'm very happy now to hand the floor over, or this speaking occasion, over to Hindia Farah of the Foreign Office, and I wish to thank you all for the partnership with the Foreign Office and with the America House. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Hindia Farah. I'm a deputy head of division at the Federal Foreign Office and mainly in charge of everything subnational diplomacy and urban diplomacy there. So I'm very happy to be here tonight. Until 2015, roughly 3 billion people will be added to the global urban population. This growth will occur almost entirely in the middle and low-income countries. However, this development does not take place in a political vacuum. On the contrary, leading scholars underscore that China's Belt and Road Initiative can in fact be described as a strategic promotion of an urban strategy. Against this background, we see that global cities, as we know them, find themselves in a time of change. Transnational and networked cities such as Chicago, London, Johannesburg, Frankfurt, or Tokyo have been shaped by the global markets in goods, capital, and talent. They have become the spine of globalization, underpinned and guaranteed by a liberal international order that emerged after the fall of the Soviet Union. The certainty that we live in a world where that will function in an ever more global and interconnected manner has, however, been shaken. In Europe, this became evident, especially evident with Russia's attack on Ukraine, a rupture that has further intensified some trends that were already underway. Prior to this, COVID-19 had been a constraining factor for numerous cities in this liberal international order, as COVID-19 emptied central business districts of workers, and this trend has not fully reversed. An additional factor is, of course, that cities become more and more the target of attacks, of actors trying to weaken the functionality of democratic economic systems. In light of this, the Federal Foreign Office's commitment to urban diplomacy is no political altruism. It is about empowering cities, taking them seriously as actors in international affairs, which they already are. For even if cities did not intend to be internationally active, the friendly and overly friendly offers from strategic competitors are ever present, and they have to deal with hacker attacks and disinformation campaigns. Cities are, at the very least, always areas of geopolitical transformation. They are arenas of geopolitical transformation. It is therefore important that they are also capable actors who can deal with these challenges. As a foreign ministry, we can contribute to that, support cities through consultation, engagement, through training, skills, competence, including on how to combat disinformation and how to deal with strategic competitors. By no means are German cities the only ones facing these questions. Cities in the US find themselves in a comparable situation. How mayors can learn from each other and find transatlantic solution. That was at the center of a first German and US mayors conference in June 2024 in New York that you, Ambassador Michaelis, had initiated. And we look forward to a follow-up conference that will take place this year in Bremen. Strengthening our cooperation and finding transatlantic solution is also one of our goals tonight. I'm therefore very grateful for today's event, and special thanks go hence to the Bertelsmann Foundation and especially the board of the Bertelsmann Foundation who made this event possible. We are also very grateful to the America House and the team of Markus Faltermeier. And above all, very special thanks go to Catherine Klöver-Eschbruck, who succeeded with great dedication to put all the individual parts together to a coherent ensemble. Without you, we would not be here tonight. Thank you.
Here comes my esteemed panel. It's already been introduced to you, but I will introduce them a little bit more. I think Marijke's over there. René, if you want to be here. Martin, if you want to be there. Can you? Yeah, perfect. Excellent. So, this is, in fact, a very timely event because, as Hendea Farah just pointed out, our cities, in many ways, are still the Achilles heel of our international systems, of our open democratic order, and not least, of course, we felt that in the very city of Munich today, earlier, when we had a tragic incident right around the central station, which has meant that many of you have decided to watch us online, as we've just heard, have decided to not come into the city. And I think that just speaks to the fact that when cities are vulnerable, when cities are hurt because of their openness, because of their inclusiveness, because of their spatial concepts that encourage the kind of interaction that we will reflect on tonight, it often means that they become vulnerable, but then in consequence we lose trust. And what is most vital in our international relations, urban to urban, but of course nation state to nation state, as we find ourselves in a moment where our international order is put into question, the very currency of trust becomes much more vital. So those of you who are watching us online instead of being here in person, a warm welcome to you. Welcome to all of you in this audience. I'm Catherine Klöver-Eschbruck. I am Senior Advisor to the Sustainable Economics Program at the Bertelsmann Stiftung, but also work and have worked throughout the course of my career not only deeply on transatlantic relations, on US domestic policy, but also on the changing roles of cities in the international environment. And we, as you have just heard, as the Foundation, have had two wonderful partners and our host, America House, here for a long time on the backs of something that was launched in 2021 when then President Biden and then Chancellor Merkel decided that we needed to reframe the transatlantic relationship for a new generation, with a new generation in intergenerational debate, contact, but also framed precisely on the new challenges that we would face as transatlantic actors in the world. And we have discussed this here on this very stage over 3 different sessions, focusing on the impact of technology on our democracy, on the impact of climate change, on the way that we collaborate, and today in securing some of the most vulnerable areas of our open democracies, our cities. This is indeed a nexus work for us at the Bertelsmann Stiftung. You heard it from Professor Dr. Daniela Schwarzer, member of our board, where we focus not only on the intergenerational aspects of critical problem solving through an active Next Gen program, but also, again, at the nexus of transatlantic relations, economic security, and, of course, the sustainability of cities. And that's why I'm so pleased our new CEO is also among us, the new chairman of our board, Dr. Hannes Amelsreiter. Welcome, Hannes. And thrilled that Andreas Michaelis, the German ambassador to the United States, is here. I was privileged to help chair and moderate that conference in June among the most just vibrant mayors from both sides of the Atlantic. If we relied on that dynamism, I think our transatlantic relationship going forward would be much safer and much securer than it might seem in these last few hours, days, and weeks. We heard earlier just how cities have emerged as actors in the global sphere. But again, not only did we feel physically in this room the vulnerability of cities, but we see it, the increase of attacks in lots of different forms. Disinformation we heard about, yes, but also, of course, cyber attacks, ransomware attacks, sabotage. Our cities and our companies are truly frontline actors. And actors that belong to an axis of evil, quote unquote, that have nefarious intent, they choose these actors because and precisely because of that interconnectedness. Our colleague and friend Parag Khanna has called that connectography, the way that cities and businesses are connected across the globe, that even at what we feel is the moment of a deglobalization, we are so infinitely connected in our density that if there are major shifts, and there are, think only of the economic impact. 267 billion euros is what German companies bleed every year due to sabotage, ransomware, and cyber attacks. Attacks on American cities and on critical infrastructure has shot up in a year and a half by 70%. And we know, of course, over the last few months, in the waning months of the Biden administration, that hacker attacks from the People's Republic of China targeted right at the heart of the financial infrastructure in attacking the US trade system and others, critical administrative infrastructures that have resonance in their local surround, but also nationally. So we want to explore today how cities deal with resilience, how they think of resilience, particularly in light of what happened this afternoon here. I think that's a perfect example. And if we had the Lord Mayor who is working, I'm sure the emergency lines of Munich here, he would tell us just exactly how he reflects on these issues. And we want to do it in an intergenerational format. So I'm about to introduce to you some of the youngest mayors on both sides of the Atlantic who have done incredible work in their own field, in their own area. Joining us, and I hope we can put Mayor Beatty on the big screen. There she is, Lacey Beatty from Beaverton, Oregon, who is not only the first female mayor of her town, of her city, home to Nike's swoosh, and every dynamic that athleticism from the house of Nike has brought to you. But she is also the youngest mayor in Beaverton, Oregon's history. If you don't know enough about Beaverton, Oregon, you will learn plenty over the course of this next hour. I know plenty because my mother's hometown is not too far down the road, which I recommend to you. Beaverton, not only known, of course, for its spirit of athleticism and its headquarters for Nike, but also as the heart of the Silicon Forest, as we call it, the connection between places like Beaverton, Eugene, Portland. Portland, of course, is an adjacent community to Beaverton, so right at the heart of a booming technology sector in the chips industry and in other industries that make it potentially interesting, quote unquote, for the kind of nefarious actions that we will hear about shortly. To my left is René Wilke. He is the mayor, Lord Mayor of Frankfurt an der Oder, a community still very much, we had a long conversation yesterday, still very much and again in transformation. He too was the youngest mayor in the history of his city, but he didn't come to this job out of nowhere, without knowledge of urban affairs. He had served in the Landtag of Brandenburg, where he headed the Committee on Urban Affairs before being elected into his mayoralty. And again, somebody who, because of the transformative qualities now of Frankfurt, has had very interesting interactions with actors from the outside that he will share in this conversation. So welcome, Mayor Wilke. Next to him is Martin van der Putten. Martin and I have been working on international issues around urban diplomacy for what seems like a decade, but that would age both of us, so we won't say any of those things. Martin is not only effectively the chief diplomacy officer of the city of Dortmund, so we have an East German city and a West German city. Dortmund, of course, known for its incredibly overpowering football team, which I don't have to tell anybody in this, as I hear the murmuring, so the Munich crowd is thinking about whether or not they're going to be quite welcoming to you. Not only known for the BVB, of course, but for the center of a lot of transformative industrial industrial power. It's a city that pulled itself up from the days of effectively the steel, the coal industries, and has transformed itself into a multifaceted industrial hub in Western Germany. And then all the way over on my left side is Dr. Mareike Ohlberg. She heads the Indo-Pacific program at the German Marshall Fund. She's also been focused very intently on China and runs the China Stockholm Forum for the German Marshall Fund. So we're pleased to have you with us, Mareike. I wanted to start precisely because of the events today, to think about what resilience, this buzzword that we've heard about so often and so many times, means in an urban context, what it means in terms of preparation, and what sort of holistically mayors think about when they think about planning for events that could be disruptive, such that they need to bounce back or bounce forward. And I wanted to start with you, Mayor Beatty. First of all, welcome. It's early in the morning for you. I hope you have a fresh cup of coffee. And welcome. We're so pleased that you can be with us in this discussion. Over to you.
Well, thank you for having me this morning, and I apologize for the background. Today, we are experiencing a snowstorm that has shut down the schools in the city, so I had to escape from my children to get into a quiet place for us. But I do want to start with saying this feels like a welcome home to me. 20 years ago, I was a young Army soldier stationed in Würzburg, Germany. That was my first kind of experience in subnational diplomacy. We lived with in a small German town outside of Würzburg on a farming community. I played lacrosse with a local club in Heidelberg, and we learned about a lot of our similarities. Although you introduced me as the youngest mayor in Beaverton's history, that is true, but this was 20 years ago. So I just turned 40 this year. Resiliency to us means an awful lot of things. It's about adaptation, it's about the ability, it's about preparedness, ensuring that our community can withstand and recover from crisis, whether they're cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, or increasingly climate-related disasters. In Beaverton, we're seeing firsthand how climate change is not an abstract issue, but a direct and urgent threat to our residents. In 2021, we had a heat dome that was a wake-up call for us. Temperatures soared to over 115 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature we had never seen in the Pacific Northwest, which led to tragic loss of life across Beaverton and Oregon. That moment reinforced our responsibility to act at the global level. And I've worked to pass legislation in our state, creating that renters have access to air conditioning, recognizing that extreme heat is now a predictable risk, not an abnormality. But it's not just heat. We're facing devastating wildfires that choke our air with smoke, record-breaking ice storms that have crippled our infrastructure. And even today, our city is shut down due to ice. These aren't one-off events. They're part of our new normal that demands a fundamental shift in how cities build resiliency. We've taken steps to strengthen our response from establishing resilient hubs, community spaces equipped to provide immediate emergency relief to weather, and ensuring our tree canopy restoration is happening at a pace that is actually helpful, which helps us mitigate heat island effects when we experience extreme heat. We're also building a stronger emergency response system with our police in our neighboring cities, and we're traveling outside the country to learn from sister cities in Japan and everywhere else that have been dealing with some of these issues far longer than we have. Resiliency is not just about bouncing back for us. It's about building forward and creating infrastructure and policies and communities and networks that anticipate these threats and reduce harm before disaster strikes. Climate change is reshaping our cities. And for us, it doesn't matter what the federal government is doing. Cities are stepping up, and we are committed to staying in the Paris Climate Accord as we work through these issues as a nation and as a world.
Thank you, Mayor Beatty. We'll talk a little bit about, I had the great privilege of working in the second Bloomberg administration, and we know how Michael Bloomberg has stepped up where a national government in the United States seems to be in retreat, but has that sort of vital interconnected component. I'll remind members of the audience that when the first Trump administration decided to pull back from the Paris climate change agreements, from the 2% goal, it was, again, a network of cities, of businesses, of federal entities that banded together in this case, in America's Pledge, 147 entities, to uphold what America could do going forward, and fundamentally buffeted the effects that terrible effects that moving a massive emitter like the United States out of a global out of a global climate change discussion could have had over time. René Wilke, Frankfurt-Oder has such an interesting geographical location, but has also become increasingly a focus for the outside world for reasons that sometimes you wonder yourself about why there is more external, almost intrusive interest in Frankfurt. And I wondered if you could share with us how you think about the complex issue of resilience, both on all of the fronts that you might see.
Okay, good evening, and thank you for the chance, and thank you also for bringing cities on the table, because I sometimes think that we are often discussing nations and countries, and people are living, of course, in the US, in Germany, but they are also living in cities, and that are the spots where people are doing sports, are in clubs, meeting each other, and where the infrastructure happens. And so it's very, very important to talk about the role of cities in this conversation. We are, maybe some people in the room don't know Frankfurt-Oder, so we are about 100 kilometers away from Berlin. East from Berlin, we are at the border to Poland. Mm-hmm. That's why my English is not that good, like yours.
It's perfect.
And we more are speaking German and Polish at our border, and we are on the Silk Road, right, from what China tries to build up. And we are a 60,000 inhabitants town, so not very big. And what happens is that in the last months and years, Chinese delegations try to come in contact with us. Very offensive. They are trying to speak with parts of my government. They are trying to speak about how building law is done in Germany, how urban planning is done in Germany. And I have to admit that we are a nice town, but no Chinese town needs to learn how urban planning does function from Frankfurt-Oder. Yeah? So that shows us somehow an interest to come in contact. We have also buildings that are for us very important, but not in a good shape, and we had Chinese actors who tried to buy them and to rebuild them and to show that they are doing good things for us. We had a big issue with trams, trains in our city, and we needed new ones, and a big Chinese company tried to build them for us and get the contract. And they didn't became the contract, but they went to Gericht, to court, against us. And such things do happen in a 60,000 people town, 100 kilometers from Berlin on the German-Polish border.
We didn't pick these towns, by the way, by accident. Beaverton, Oregon, similar population size to Frankfurt an der Oder, because some of these challenges work out differently, express themselves differently on both sides of the Atlantic, but they all fit into a wider sense of resilience. Mareike Oberg, this is exactly what you look at. We heard in the introduction that, of course, Chinese FDI policies are very targeted. Many of you will know, of course, the most, I think, at least vivid example in the German context, the city of Duisburg, which became the Kopfbahnhof, as we say, the end station of the Belt and Road Initiative, where Chinese investments completely transformed the interior harbor of the city of Duisburg, the lived infrastructure of the city. And then when Chinese investors began to extricate themselves, caused major problems for the mayor there for urban infrastructure. And we've seen colleagues who've really traced that, particularly People's Republic of China has used a lot of their development policy to factually rebuild urban infrastructure, urban design. So this is a very interesting point here in sort of China's guise in Africa and other places in Latin America. So urbanization as a development strategy, but one that tethers many parts of the world closer to China. So when you think about resilience widely spoken, we've heard a climate dimension, we've heard Chinese intervention, FDI dimension. How do you define it?
I mean, I'm speaking on this from the point of view that I have worked on, which is of course focused on China and focused primarily on partnerships with China. So sometimes you might get investments coming in or offers coming in, but a lot of cities and other local places also have partnerships with China. And what I have found is that there is, at this point, still tremendous demand for more information about, who are the Chinese partners that are approaching them? Like, who do you have to deal with? If you have suddenly an investment offer on the table, it often comes with a lot of urgency. It's often sent to several cities at the same time that are then played against one another. So overall, what we found in the last couple of years is a lot of cities, and especially smaller cities, feel overwhelmed with a lot of the offers and a lot of the actors coming from China and asking them for certain things. Because there is, in the past, there was not as much attention paid to some of the risks associated with those partnerships. And now a lot of cities, especially smaller cities, are a little bit worried that what they might get if they have those partnerships, and they don't necessarily have the capacity to evaluate all of these offers. So part of building resilience is also making sure that cities and smaller communities are able to properly evaluate and deal with offers that they get from China. This is compounded by the fact that in those subnational relationships, there is a massive asymmetry. What do I mean by that? I mean, a city like Shanghai or Guangzhou, Beijing has hundreds, the international department has hundreds of employees, and that meets, in a best case scenario, in Germany, a city that maybe has a dozen employees, and that's already a really good scenario. If it's a smaller place, it might be like half a job that's dedicated to all international relations, right? So part of resilience building to deal with these kinds of potential risks is also equipping cities to better assess and evaluate what the offers that they're getting from potential Chinese partners. And there is this increasing demand for it from cities themselves. I have found a lot of cities are actually interested in gaining more information, and so far, oftentimes not enough information needs that are being met. So I think that is definitely an area where we can improve still and can offer better We'll talk
things. A little bit about what nexus or what interactions are vital, because we heard about the efforts at the Federal Foreign Office. Where do you report? Are you reporting this to an economics ministry? Are you kicking this up to your next federal surround? Where does this information go? And Mareike, I think your point was well taken, in as much as cities, of course, are struggling with the climate change dimension, often only have if at all, a budget to have one resiliency officer to plan, at least on paper, how you do emergency response, how you coordinate in those manners, how you learn from other cities and other surrounds. Having a chief international officer, like the city of Dortmund, is still a rarity. And of course, we're not here to suppose that interest from abroad in an urban innovation structure where you have great R&D, where you have booming infrastructure in cities that are transforming is always nefarious. Dortmund has a city partnership with a Chinese city, and a lot of times those relationships are built on trust as well. Can you share a little bit about how you think about resiliency in the context of Dortmund, but then also as it pertains to your international partnerships?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thanks for having me here. And I will start with a quote, and that underlines what the mayor said, a quote of Johannes Rau, the former president of Germany. He said that cities are the serious case of democracy. Mm-hmm. That means every single crisis, catastrophe, threat hits cities, can hit the city. So you have to deal with the whole range of all the things that can happen. You can never imagine. So this is the reason why cities are, I think we are well prepared for all the crises. You can't be prepared by 100%, but we're just trying to be in front of the, before the crisis comes to the city, comes to the road. And so it's pretty difficult, but we're professionals, we're working on it. And we have international exchange on it. We want to learn from each other. We want to learn from other cities, as the mayor mentioned as well. And I will give you just a short insight to the city of Dortmund. We established years ago a municipal situation center that is right now, it was belonged to the fire department. Right now it belongs to the staff of the mayor's office. So what are they doing right now? They're searching, they're doing research, they're monitoring worldwide crises. They're searching worldwide what will happen. If there are crises, is there an attack, or is there a migration issue? What kind of effect it could be have for Dortmund, maybe, if there is a situation in North Africa, for example. So, and they are dealing with disinformation. They are just doing a security report to the mayor. So, and this is, we want to extend this office for the situation center, but it becomes more and more important for us. This first, how we deal with resiliency. And the mayor mentioned for crisis, heat, flood, all the big issues we read in the newspaper. But I think we have so many crisis catastrophes. It could be also plane crashes, or we had last year the Euro 24, the football championship, and nobody knew what will happen. If we had flood, we have heat, we had disinformation. So, and coming back to your other question, the second part, dealing with China, we have at the moment more than 100 city partnerships between Germany and China. We have more than 100 or 1,500 partnerships between universities in China and in Germany. We have as a sister city Xi'an since 35 years. It started with cultural exchange and educational exchange. Right now we're on another level because we're on a level on, it's more about technological things, it's geopolitical things, it's more innovation things. So we recognized that the topics are just changed and how to deal with it. We have, the mayor mentioned as well, so many inquiries a week, like 5 or 10 inquiries from Chinese delegations. I don't know where they come from. It's all organized by Frankfurt am Main. They have an agency sitting there and sending their inquiries with a complete agenda. And we say, well, we can't handle it, we can't do it. It's all focused on technological things. So at the moment, it's on a good level, but it's more about economy.
Well, I think managing those individual relations and the kind of resources I think that cities need, or where they then can help one another when it comes to risk identification, is partially why we're here. Mayor Beattie, I didn't mean to make Beaverton smaller than it is. Our criteria was under 100,000 inhabitants. It's easy for Martin to say this because he is in charge of the 9th largest city in his state, in the most populous state in this country, with over 500 inhabitants. But it's a little different when you're managing 96,000 people. And I wanted you to think about, I mean, just to pivot off of what Martin said, the fact that cities now are so much more in charge of managing their own threat landscape. When Martin just spoke about the Situation Center, when I first walked into the Situation Center that we had in the city of New York, it frankly blew my mind because I got my start at CNN and it looked exactly like a television control room. And we were tracking every call that was coming in from 311 and trying to extrapolate threats or advantages from those calls. That is much harder to do, even if you have a real role in the U.S. Council of Mayors, as you do on their advisory board, and you can speak to a much larger audience of mayors there. But how do you think about mapping the threat landscape for Beaverton, so close to Portland, so close to the Pacific coast? How do you think about that?
That's a great question. And I think just starting with kind of the premise that all cities are global now, right? I'm speaking to a German audience from my office bedroom in Beaverton, Oregon. Just over the last 6 months, I've had the amazing opportunity. Bloomberg flew in mayors to Mexico City to talk about some of these issues together. They rented a whole hotel. We were all there together addressing these issues. I got to travel to Lima, Peru with 5 other US mayors to talk about what we're talking about today. Sub-diplomacy, China's impact, where America's soft approach to diplomacy is likely going away when we see China making massive infrastructure investments into countries, but not doing what America does, which is teach English, bring in vaccines, treat people with dignity and respect. You know, China is offering quite often to build these big ports to boom the economy. That's attractive to mayors. We need to make miracles happen on a daily. We're subjected to our federal government here in the United States withdrawing funds. We have an abysmal property tax system here in Oregon. I always have to look at public-private partnerships to get anything built. So when an outside country comes in with really great ideas, and most importantly, money, it's really hard for mayors to say no because our community expects us to maintain roads, build football stadium, build performing arts centers, and we have a really hard time doing it. I was just in North Africa, in Rabat, Morocco, in Tunis, Tunisia, talking about very similar issues. Our global cities are all facing this impact of how do we build, how do we maintain, how do we do it together. So in Beaverton, particularly with Nike's world headquarters being here, Intel's headquarters is in the city next to ours. We have to think about this constantly because every time we let a foreign government in to help us, there are no free gifts. And it either comes at the cost of construction projects, maybe not meeting the standard that we have. And we're not lucky like New York. We don't have a situation room. But as the mayor, I've been working on bringing in outside fundraising to bring in extra staff outside of our municipal government. We're going to have a foreign service officer embedded in Beaverton City Hall. 5 cities in the United States is getting that. I'm getting one of them. We're bringing in communication help so our community understands what we're doing. And in America, we're facing mass deportation issues, not dissimilar to Germany's migration issues or North Africa's migration issues. So we're having to deal with these global issues on top of the really boring stuff that all of us wanted to be mayors. I wanted to run for mayor because my community deserved to have a global leader here, but also to build sidewalks, maintain streets, make sure that our water system that is all digital can withstand a threat from a foreign government. If something happened to our water source, we would only have days until if our water source was poisoned before something would dramatically happen. So we're constantly running threats analysis on our water system, but also our building codes and thinking about investments not just on face value. We have to do our community the service of digging deep into the details. In Tunisia, they were talking about how China came in to build 5G, but it didn't quite look like the way they thought it was going to agree and turn out. So how do we maintain these long-term investments as mayors that might only serve a couple years or 1 or 2 terms? How do we look at it long-term? That's the way that we're looking at it in Beaverton right now.
How do you, with the threat assessments that you do on these various different areas, we've just heard the critical infrastructure piece. I'm sure this also, connects to your hospital system. Some of which might be in private hands, some of which are in municipal hands. I'm sure there's some cost sharing there. You're using this for yourself, but are you feeding this someplace else? I.e., are you, whatever you're seeing come toward you, do you have a way of getting that now? We had, over the last couple of years, of course, the Office for Subnational Diplomacy at the State Department to help with some of the diplomatic intelligence that cities are bringing in, with some of the recon that they're seeing, and to get help, to get back up, and we heard how engaged the German Foreign Office is now in this frame. Is that where that information goes? Are you playing that out to the Council of Mayors? Are you doing a lot of that threat assessment first in your surround? Take us through how you create resonance going forward.
Well, I do it in a couple ways. First, our regional mayors, so the greater Portland regional area, we have a mayor's consortium, which I'm the chair of. So we meet weekly. We talk about mostly threats from federal government funding and state government funding that impact how cities do things. So that is a area where we share our own intelligence at the state and local level. The West Coast mayors have a consortium where we often meet and talk together. I have an advisory role on the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Right. There's 25 of us that advise our strategies, and we meet weekly in different, we have a water board, we have an infrastructure board. Right now, I'm working on our housing task force that's going to be charged with working directly with the Trump campaign or Trump administration on getting housing out. And of course, the reason I'm getting a foreign service officer is what you were just talking about, the state and local ambassador program that was created under the Biden administration. That's not been filled under the current administration, that we're hoping will be filled, because cities have this unique role. And a lot of our threat does come from those foreign service officers working abroad that are communicating back to us. Beaverton is the most diverse city in the Northwest. 1 in 5 people were born outside of the United States. 1 in 3 speak a language other than English. And so we have a large consulate corps as well as ambassadors that are vetted here. Just this week, I'm doing a round of meetings with all of our ambassadors and all of our consulate corps to talk about how cities, and particularly for us, the threat of tariffs is going to hit our economy because of Nike. And so I want to make sure that they know Beaverton is open for business. We have space. We want businesses to be located here. That secondary, tertiary business to Nike is our #1 employer. If something happens to our supply chain issue at Nike, it has dramatic impact on our economic viability as a city. And so I never thought in a million years I would be dealing with foreign national investment in companies the way that I have to do now. So many of our community members rely on a paycheck from our global companies.
Well, I want to kick that whole last part over to Michael Ulbeck in just a second, but I want to go back to Mayor Wilke, because not only in our opening conversation, we talked about your proximity to Poland. You're effectively twinned almost in the city physically. But you know, in sort of thinking about, and Mayor Beatty has spoken to this, how the urban dimension is linked, of course, to the national threat dimension, because not only do you have the China piece, but then potentially also some threats coming in from the east. When we hear the spokesman of the Russian Federation, Mr. Peskov, say that once ATACMS go out, this was a couple of months ago, now a month and a half, that, for instance, now critical infrastructure in places around American bases in Germany and elsewhere in Poland are now game. And we've seen hybrid attacks really step up and increase to sort of respond to the kind of Western aid that's being delivered to Ukraine. The idea that, you know, you now have city officials in Berlin trying to figure out how to keep city water infrastructure, critical infrastructure safe because of its vulnerabilities. You see some of those vulnerabilities in the IT infrastructure in particular, coming from all sorts of different potential, attackers, and seeing you as a target. Can you reflect a little bit on that publicly?
Yeah, that's publicly is a keyword. To be honest, when I got the invitation and we talked about this conversation, I asked myself, what can I say in such a room? Because, of course, here are only nice people, but maybe one or two can also take conclusions, and we get a target. If I speak very openly about risks and the things that are not that much in shape like they should be. And small towns are not that good prepared, because we don't have the people, we don't have the competence, we don't have the money to solve all those issues. And we have security issues with people who are in our towns who can be a risk, and we all know that in nearly every town there are people who are potential risk for others. We have security issues with critical infrastructure. Mayor told it. Also with our water system, we are at the moment discussing the rebuilding of a very very important street, and we have much discussions about it because it's a street in the inner center of our city, and people want to discuss it with us also with a view of infrastructure that is in the Boden, in the ground, yeah. And we can't share it with the people because we are afraid that those information could get in hands that are not good for us. And IT security is maybe the biggest problem in our infrastructure in all cities. We had IT attacks in towns like Schwerin. Even 1 year later, not every issue was solved after that. And one problem maybe is, maybe that's the biggest problem, social media, disinformation, manipulation of people, because in my opinion, we can handle nearly every crisis in our towns if we have trust, if there's trust in the local government, and if the people have communication ways with us and they trust the official communication ways. And we can get in contact and the people trust our information. But at the moment, I see that everywhere, the informations are getting more, not diverse is not the right word, they are, the people...
Fragmenting.
And the people are very much losing the competence to come to get involved in all the discussions that are at the moment going. And if I maybe one example, if I talk with my mother, I love my mother, of course, but if I take her handy and look at her social media feed, and I nearly every 2 weeks talk with her about what she sees there, and I see how much she is vulnerable because nobody told her how to manage all that stuff that's happening there. She is not competent, and I think most people are not competent, and that's why our society gets in a very bad position. And if that happens, then every crisis is even worse because we can't handle it in our towns.
And I think it's useful to point out here that Pew Research did a survey 2.5 years ago where they were looking at trust in government in the United States. And those of you who pay close attention to the United States will not be surprised that trust in government has been eroding over time. Many of you know that Moody's, the credit bureau, effectively downgraded the U.S.'s creditworthiness, not on the account of dysfunction of one government or another, but for 20 years of governance malfeasance and governance dysfunction. But that 70%, so when 17% say that they trust Congress, and this again was 2.5 years ago, 71% of Americans trust their mayors, trust their local administrations, because they see them as really the locus of the only place where they can still have direct interaction. They can help make direct decisions. This falls into ways of thinking about participatory budgeting and involving citizens. But we heard from Mayor Beatty, cities integrating people linguistically such that they also don't fall prey to disinformation. I mean, my charge for the city of New York was to try to figure out how to help 1.8 million New Yorkers whose first language was not English, who were limited English proficiency, where the mayor decided, I cannot have these people unlinked to an economic process, to progress in the city, and as such make them vulnerable. And this is 20 years ago, we had the issue of Russian language information in single language stairwells in New York City, where effectively disinformation was being spread through print publications among an older Russian population. That has, of course, exacerbated and changed in the virtual surround. But Martin, this is, you know, a place also to reflect how Dortmund has dealt not only with the disinfo piece, which is, I know has been challenging to you, but also in the IT space, because as I said in the intro, municipalities have faced attacks, ransomware attacks, cyber attacks that have shot up by 148% in 3 years, which is an absurd number, but is a number by the Center for Internet Security in the United States. So can you share from your practice in Dortmund how that has manifested?
Yeah, of course we are also hit. by cyber attacks. Just in a physical form, the number, interesting number, it's approximately 2,000 attacks a week. And just fun fact beside that, it's increasing on Friday. And then it's going down on the weekend because hackers also hackers also need a weekend. That's the point. And they start again on Monday.
Okay, right. Okay.
So that's true. But we're well prepared, I guess. But it could also hit us like Schwerin or other cities, and they're still working on it. So we're just really aware of it. But it's this is the hard thing about it. But about the attacks, this is cyber attacks. But we have also other attacks like disinformation. I think we're well prepared as well because we do a lot of community management in the social media channels. We are talking to the people. We're feeding them as well. We are going to quit at X next year or this year. Sorry, and we're well prepared for this information. We are with you, with German Marshall Fund, in a playbook. We just developed a playbook together with you in other cities. So, and we just established a task force working on this information, go to the people, make education into the administration, into the people on the streets. So, and we try to raise awareness for all these topics, but at the end, to be honest, it could be also, we could be also attacked by, or other way around. We're working on smart city. Every single city wants to be a smart city, but have you ever proved what kind of components, technological things you are just putting on a traffic light or on a camera? It could be also from China or just from Russia. So we just try to aware the people who are dealing with it. And and this is also my topic in my team. By the way, we are on the lucky side. In my team, we're 12 people, dozen. But it's just a luxury for us to work on it and to focus on it. Yeah.
That was a bridge to Mareike's work. You mentioned the playbook, this idea of how, I mean, Mareike, when you're identifying, I mean, you look specifically at China, but you know, disinformation, of course, is widespread. It's a wide problem we're seeing. We're all expecting, again, ahead of the German elections now on February 23rd, that we're going to see a spike in disinformation coming from all over, but ultimately doing what both these mayors have discussed, you know, attempting to reduce the fabric of trust in an urban community such that you can then build on the sort of vacuum that creates politically, where you can begin to split groups. Martin mentioned the playbook. Where do you see other actors, NGOs, foundations coming in to help, you know, bridge that information gap, you know, really bring resources together? Because as Mayor Beatty said, you know, mayors have to do everything and make sure the schools open on time, take the trash out, and the sidewalks don't have potholes.
I mean, it's really a matter of people being able to contribute their expertise on a very specific topic, right? In my case, that is influence, interference, disinformation campaigns coming from usually Chinese government or party-affiliated actors, but obviously people have different areas of expertise that people who work in locally cannot build up. So really the idea would be to be able to pool this expertise better, to have ways to, you know, consult, to give advice, to come up with handbooks, to come up with, I don't even know, like a central website, a point where you can pool this kind of information on, you know, who are various actors that you're dealing with, what are certain patterns of interactions that you're going to see, what are certain risks that you're going to see, and then of course having a whole section on how do you mitigate those risks, how can you assess what the risks are, and those are things that if you're working in an international, you know, if you're Director of International Affairs are working, you don't have time to do that, and it would not make sense to replicate it every single time. So this kind of information needs to be pooled. Now, I know, for instance, when it comes to relations with China, there's been quite a bit of demand for like a central information point, for a central information hotline, which, you know, there's some back and forth on whether that is going to happen or not, but that's certainly something that that a lot of cities have asked for because they're simply overwhelmed. The same is true in universities, by the way, which of course is part of local relations. A lot of universities simply can't deal with all the different risks that they're having to assess, like dual use risks, various, free speech risks on campus, etc. So to pool this kind of, to pool resources more effectively, use expertise, external expertise more effectively, and also, I guess, have better offers for somebody who does need advice urgently, because they
and where should that line lead? What are you hearing? Do people want to be calling the Foreign Office? Do people want to be calling the Economics Ministry? Do people want to be calling whatever the data overview, critical infrastructure part of their governments? Like, where would they like to get that information or deliver the kind of insights that they're seeing?
I think if you're asking people locally, they don't really care where it is. They
but
just want to have it.
Somewhere?
They want to have it. They don't care if it's at the Foreign Office. They don't care if it's at any other ministry. They just want to have a central point where information is pooled. Now, that it's difficult to set up. I do think that there are a lot of difficulties with that. But I do think we are going to have to think about how to pool this kind of information better, and how to figure out how can we help people with ad hoc questions.
Right.
Some of that can be dealt with better exchanges between, horizontally between cities, right? And some of that is already happening, that people are pooling their expertise and they're talking about different challenges that they have faced, and oftentimes they will find out that, oh, you got this kind of question from your partners in your partner city in China. We got the exact same thing, and then of course you can already swap strategies on how you're going to deal with it if it's a difficult request, right? So that is one way of handling it, but there does need to be, I think, more central pooling of basic information that is essential to navigate those relationships.
Right. Well, this is the optimistic wish list round. Before we turn it over to you here physically in the audience, if we have any questions online over Zoom, we're also happy to take those. But this is where we bring you into the conversation, and we know that we have a couple of local and community leaders in this room. So I will waive my otherwise strict Harvard rule that what you have to say has to end in your voice going up and there being a question mark at the end. If you want to share a specific example from your urban surround, from things that you've seen, that will be your opportunity to do so. But in our last round with the panel, Mayor Beatty, this is really where we want to think about what might we do better together. We heard from Mareike Ohlberg what she's picking up in this incredible urgency, both on disinformation and on the FDI piece that you reflected on. When people come in and trying to make these offers, and you said, well, look, I have these various different networks, but that seems hard given all the challenges that you have. What would you want specifically, potentially, in the transatlantic collaboration, the transatlantic surround? What should all of our communal homework be as transatlantic partners together?
That's a great question. And I don't want to eclipse over the fact that misinformation and disinformation hits cities incredibly difficult, particularly when we are the #1 trusted source of government, at least here in the United States. We've had series of attacks on our public comment, AI fakes calling in with very anti-Semitic comments, very LGBT unfriendly comments, and then what it does is it disincentivizes our community from interacting with us because they don't want to hear it. So we put out a publication directly from the city. When we poll, it's our #1 source of news. It is an actual printed mailer we send to every single one of our residents once a quarter with information that's incredibly important. So as much as we're trying to move technology forward and it makes our life easier, we can't stop and miss opportunities for these low-tech touches that still work, that have no way of having interference in them. China can't attack, or another country can't attack our information when we print it in-house and mail it. So just thinking about those things. If I had a magic wish list, it's that global mayors spent more time together. Mayors are the hardest working level of government, in my humble opinion. We are closest to the people. We understand very intimately the issues of national issues, country issues, state issues, and the great ideas land with this level of government. I say all the time, in the United States, if we voted based on the level of government that impacted your life the most, mayor, not president, would be on the top of that ballot. And so thinking about how we can spend more time like this, learning from each other, and not just where we have agreements. I traveled to Morocco with Republican mayors that had never been outside of the country, that had never experienced what soft diplomacy looks like. And so how do we create these opportunities through sister cities, one-on-one relationships? How do we have each other's phone numbers to just call and say, hey, does this seem right to you? Sometimes we need an outside perspective. Have you experienced this? And Bloomberg Philanthropies, as you know, you worked for Mayor Bloomberg, does a lot of this work, but we need nonprofit organizations now more than ever to tie this network together stronger.
Well, that's our homework right here at the Bertelsmann-Stiftung. Mayor Wicke, in that sense, what is your wish list? Who should listen better? Who should hear more? Who should interact with you more efficiently, so you can share what you're seeing, your knowledge, horizontally within the Städtetag with other mayors? Where do we need more connection, and maybe transatlantically, what should we do more?
I would say at first we sure need more advice, because especially smaller towns, and in Germany we have mostly small towns, but we are not that good prepared, and we have not the infrastructure to deal all those new threats alone. And everyone is handling it alone, in my feeling at the moment, and we are at the beginning of a new preparing that's necessary. Second, I'm not in foreign policy, and I don't want to give nations advices, but our discussion here shows that if all countries try to think like the slogan America First. We see at the moment, even in Germany, that leaves places open, and others are using that open places, like China and others. And if we want that, okay, but I think it's really in the own interest of a country like the US, but also in other interests, that we are not leaving other countries alone and not leaving all this place open for others, because what Mayor said is totally right. You have to be able to afford moral. If a city like mine, with not that much money, is confronted with I don't know, every country that comes to us or a company and says, we are creating jobs, we are paying taxes, your city will be more wealthy than before. How can I go to my citizens and say, but we shouldn't, let's stay poor? That's not an easy thing.
Trade-off, right.
The maybe third thing is I wrote the same like for the US is happening in Europe. We are getting divided more and more and separated, and that's if it's going that way, we are getting more and more how's the word, bedeutungslos.
We lose relevance.
Yeah, we lose. Germany is a big country, but Europe is much bigger and more important. Right. And if every country in Europe goes a separate way, we will get less important. And the maybe fourth thinking is that regulation in social media is needed, really needed, and we need more competent citizens. Our citizens aren't enough informed and enough competent for the future. And the last thing that's maybe connected with that, newspapers are dying. In some regions in Brandenburg, not in my region, there are newspapers that aren't delivering anymore, only online, and they are getting lower numbers, and that's in the future it will be in that region that the people have on information proposals, Facebook and TikTok, and maybe the channels of the local government.
Right.
But that's not good, because of course if I'm informing how good I'm doing my job. And every mayor does that, every local government does that. We need competent journalists. And if media and journalism is dying, the people are only confronted with those informations, and that's not good for our societies.
And that, of course, is indeed a transatlantic phenomenon. The statistics in the United States are that every week 2 local papers in the United States die. Multiply that by 52, and you really have a death knell for local journalism, for that kind of explaining function that makes sense of all the global complexity raining down on local communities that you've heard so vividly in the example shared today. Marijke, I mean, you look at this both from sort of the 30,000-foot perspective in terms of what different national actors should be doing, in as much as you give strategic advice to all comers, if you will, and you've heard that. What are you seeing emerging in this panoply of challenges as sort of the most effective ways to share lessons around adaptation, around changes? What do you see working?
I mean, I do think some of the things that are being set up or that have already been set up are working, and those are precisely some of those exchanges that have been mentioned already a bunch of times. And that is, you know, whether that is federal, subnational, whether that is subnational, so city-to-city ties, or whether that is, I think there are some role models also of larger cities partnering up with smaller cities, so to have like regional partnerships with cities of different sizes, right, where perhaps you can bring some of the smaller cities along. Yeah. But this is all, I mean, this takes time. It costs money, so when it does happen, and when people do have the time, and when people have the resources to do it, I think it's quite effective. But there is, of course, the question of, you know, where do you get funding for that? How can you set it up? How can you set it up in a way that maximizes information sharing from various roundtables upwards and downwards? So I think those formats are good. But there's a lot that we can still improve to make them more effective in terms of information sharing, making sure that they're resourced and that they're established over time and in the long run.
This, of course, is vital in the context of, you know, shifts to budgets for multilateral organizations that feed down in all sorts of different ways. But of course, almost every democratic country is stuck right now in a battle around their own budgets, around their own what's important and how you prioritize, but it links very much to this discussion of how we think fundamentally, holistically about security, because as everybody here has said, if you keep, you know, vulnerabilities are what they are, then no manner of wanting to increase your innovative capacity and your competitiveness will outweigh the fact that you are remaining effectively so open such that you make yourself vulnerable. Martin, what's on your wish list, both in terms of opportunities transatlantically, but places where you still see opportunities to, quote unquote, have cities be better listened to, be better connected, get the adaptation right?
I have a long wish list, but it's great to see you here from FFO in the first row, because I think you're both fans of the subnational diplomacy term, and I know you try to integrate us, the cities, as a strategic tool. So, but my wish list and my demand to the national government is to integrate the cities, because the knowledge of China or USA or it lies in the cities as well. Right. We have a huge capacity for building up for years. We have associations, we have civil society, we have administrations, economy working on China, on USA, on all the countries worldwide. We have the capacity, the knowledge, so integrate us in your strategy. Just as an example, when the national government just wrote their China strategy, the first draft that was leaked, that was pretty good for us, because we saw that you used the cities as a strategic tool. The Chinese, they recognize it so far.
The stuff I write gets leaked.
I know, I know, but the final version was softened, was washed out a bit. I know why, for political reasons. But whenever you write the next China strategy, just use the first draft, please.
I recommend, Mareike has a new paper out on this. I recommend Mareike's reflections on this as well. You'll be unsurprised that she has a number of these points in her reflections as well. We have about 10, 12 minutes for questions from the audience in this room. And we want to bring all of you in. I see some hands going up. When you speak, please introduce yourself, give us your perspective, ask a question of my esteemed panel. If you want to share a perspective from your local surround, you're welcome to do so. We have a microphone coming to you, sir.
Hello, my name is Peter Walny. I am a retired person, so my question is from cities or clinics, or they are already attacked and have damaged. Are these points where you have chances to learn from that, or what is the connection and possibilities to learn from this accidents?
That's a very good question. So when the ransomware attack has happened, when the cyber incursion has happened, we mentioned Schwerin. What can we learn from things that either happen in the direct surround or that you have seen?
Short answer, we in the Deutsche Städtetag, that's
the German Council of Mayors.
Yeah, it's an important council in our country. We are talking about such things, and if something like that happens in one city, the mayor shows all his insights to the others. Like the mayor of Schwerin told us from the beginning to today what has happened, what was the problem, how they try to solve, what he would do in another way with the knowledge of today. And we are trying to adapt and to learn from that. So, for example, we have a security advisor for IT issues. And for example, one time in the year, we have all the colleagues of my whole government, that are nearly 1,000 people, and they are getting lessons about IT security. How do you have to prepare, how do you handle mails and spam and such things? How do you handle your handy and all such things? So we try to learn from each other, but every time new things are happening. So we are always, my feeling, we are always running behind the things.
Right, right. Mayor Beatty, how do you think about that in your context? Learning from cyber attacks, learning from ransomware attacks, and keeping up with the technological curve?
Well, I'm going to steal a term from my military days where we always would say, plans are only good till first contact. So we can spend a lot of time planning, but once we have that initial contact, things change. And so we have to constantly do a feedback loop and after-action review to go back and look at our plan and then what went wrong. And that's the really important piece that government doesn't want to do, because governments aren't expected to fail. We have a society or in the United States that failure isn't an option in government, similar to business. And so one, we have to be vulnerable with the community that sometimes we fail. And what did we learn from that? You know, we learned a great deal when Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana. We did a big plan, and that plan went on the shelf. And so what did we learn from that? So we have to constantly think about not only reviewing the plans that we write, what went wrong, but then going back. Mayors, in my opinion, never have the luxury of the same crisis twice. And so we have to be incredibly adapted and take lessons learned in one catastrophe and apply them to another, while being vulnerable and communicating with our citizens that sometimes failure happens. In a job that requires people to vote for you, mayors often retreat into a space of, I don't want to tell the public, I don't want to tell other levels of government, because if it gets out, people aren't going to vote for me again. And so that is a challenging aspect when you're dealing with elected officials. So we have to really push on our professional staff that are in city halls to do this work alongside of us. And to be honest, they need to take a little bit of the blame and heat off the elected officials sometimes, particularly when it's not our fault that crises happen. But we are the face of every emergency in our city.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, more questions from the audience. I have, by the way, the light is entirely in my eyes, so I struggle to see to see you. Okay, there's a question right there. Microphone coming to you.
Hello, my name is Julia Pinder. I'm an advisor. I'm accompanying administrations and cities in processes of change and strategies, mainly in the field of sustainable development. And I would like to know more about what kind of structures do we have in Germany for small villages to gain information and to get advice from the federal state or from other institutions, not from the private field. Where do you get your information from? Who is helping you as a mayor in a small village, please?
Well, Frankfurt was not a small village. It's a city on its own. But where did you get your information?
The truth is that there is not that much help. Yeah, we are trying to mostly talk with each other, the mayors with each other. We help each other. And sometimes we have meetings with Ministry for Inner Affairs of our country, Brandenburg. Sometimes we have conversations with our Bundeswehr, military structures. That happens maybe once a year. And if something happens, then we are in a better contact. But mostly we are trying to solve our issues alone and with each other at the moment.
That's the complicated reality. We have a question right here in the front row. Microphone coming to you right here.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. Personally, I'm very happy that you addressed the topic of pulling resources together and specifically working together with NGOs, because I'm a member of an NGO, an international student volunteer group for addressing environmental issues. And actually in the US or also in Korea, for example, we are pretty huge, but here in Germany, not that predominant yet. What is the interfaces that we have of reaching out to you, for example? How can NGOs with governmental organizations work together? How is this, for example, seeking advice or sharing insights, sharing power, so to say? Because I mean, the power of young people with passion should not be underrated, I feel. Therefore, what would you advise us? Is this a good strategy, for example, what I'm doing right now, that I'm visiting and trying to connect? Is that a good strategy?
Mayors and Matti. And Matti, what's a good strategy when people with ideas, with fresh ways of doing things, with young NGOs want to come talk to you? How should they do it?
Talk to the mayor, wait in front of the city hall and talk to the mayor. No, just you can, practically that if you step out of the city hall, you're talking to the people all the time, and you should use the chance to go to the mayor, talk to them, write an email, and they will answer you definitely. And if not, it's from my perspective. In Dortmund, we are using the approach of swarm intelligence, that as a city and as an administration, we need all the information from all the people, from all the inhabitants living in the city. It's civil society, it's just volunteers, it's workers, it's tourists, it's administrations. So we want your ideas how to develop a city. So we have just established some departments for volunteering, for converting SDGs. It's close to my department. So, and talking with the civil society and with NGOs. Maybe that's kind of approach.
Mayor Wilke, any other ideas, good thoughts, advice?
I would say not only talk to the mayor, because everyone wants to go to the mayor, but I can say that I have 1,000 very competent and nice people who have more time than me. And if you are coming to me, I have to prioritize. Is that helpful for what I have to manage and have to do? And if it's very, very, very helpful, then we will talk. But if not, then I will do other things in that time. But other people in my government have more time and maybe are the better people to get in contact, and they will tell me if there is something I should know and I should deal with. So, yeah, my advice would be try it with the competent people in the government of the cities.
Mayor Beatty, do you have any other slicing advice on how young people with good ideas on sustainability should be getting in touch with their mayor's office?
Yeah, so I once read a statistic recently that in a mayor's first term, they're presented with over 1,000 new ideas. And so sometimes it's not the lack of new ideas that we have an issue with, it's what the previous mayor just said. It's racking and stacking what's the most important. Even when I'm reaching out to mayors of larger cities, I take the approach of, hey, if I can't meet with you, is there someone on your staff I can meet with? And so don't think that the mayor is always the golden prize. Most of our ideas come from staff level community members. And so LinkedIn is how a lot of people get to me, and I immediately hand them off to staff. And people feel like that's defeatist, but it's not. That's where the change in City Hall happens. So mayors will steal your idea and claim it for victory. That is the way that we operate. So please bring us new ideas, but just recognize getting in the door is the hardest part. And by simply offering to meet with somebody else, you're more likely to succeed in that request.
Well, I really appreciate that we had an intergenerational interactive piece here at the very end, because we all know that that is, not only are the cities our future because they have to deal with the complexity of issues, but they still have to deliver quintessential public services to remain trust-bound, to remain the center of of an understanding of what governance, particularly democratic, pluralistic, open governance still means, particularly in the transatlantic relationship. We've heard the panoply of challenges, but I think what we've also heard from these four panelists is where opportunities lie. They lie in better interaction with the national surround. They lie in better platforms of very specific points of exchange between cities on both sides of the Atlantic, but internationally writ large. We've heard how much more knowledge is needed to not only address the complexity of these issues, but also work on them so that they make sense to citizens, because the underlying component here, and I think every mayor's office, is fundamentally the bridge of the world from complexity to the individual citizen, the individual voter. We've heard how challenging that has become in an environment of disinformation and in a situation where our openness can make us vulnerable if we don't find better ways of sharing that information, sharing it with our national surround, using the resources we have, because the resources can be enormous, but they need to be identified more specifically. We heard not only implicitly but explicitly that this is going to take some money and some smart thinking and some engagement from other societal actors, including foundations and think tanks, for which we are here. But I think we've also heard a fair amount of ideas in the ways of solutions. This is work that luckily puts none of us out of work, but conversely will allow us to work harder, work more effectively together. So please join me in thanking my panel.